Ladies and gentlemen, the guy at the end of the bar proudly presents the Dantanna's Late Shift. Brought to you by attorney Ray Giudice. And now the two men to take you to new heights in sports conversation, Nick Cellini and Matt Chernoff.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Dantanna's Late Shift, all presented by attorney Ray Giudice. Ray will join us later to talk about all the things legally in the sports world. Brandon Leak, you see here to my left. We'll talk to Jim Powell, the fine play-by-play voice of the Atlanta Braves, coming up here in about 10 minutes or so. But we start with the Braves and a team that continues to lead the NL East by a nice margin. They've said internally we can play better, offensively being the one area they need more consistency. But as we sit here right now, they've kind of been between this 5.5, 6.5, 7.5 game lead, Brandon, over the Washington Nationals. Now, the Nats could get hot, certainly, but this Brave team, as I said, they feel like they haven't played their best ball yet.
They haven't, and when you look at the fact that you just started having Jason Hayward start to come around, B.J. Upton starting to get on base and knock in runs, the full potential of the Braves hasn't been unlocked. And when you look at how they won against a very good team, the Diamondbacks leading the National League West, you had a game where you had a shutout in Game 1, you had a game where you exploded for 11 runs in Game 2, and then you had a masterful pitching performance by Paul Maholm in Game 3. 3 ways to win a ball game, I think, shows versatility by this Atlanta Braves team, which I think will be good coming down the stretch with a ton of games to be played at home.
And now the Marlins come to Atlanta as kind of a tricky team. And we know their record isn't great, but they've won 14 of 21 as they entered that series, so they could present some problems playing with not much to lose, as the old theory goes. Now, the Braves had themselves a big weekend, as home team told you there, with the wins over the Diamondbacks, but off the field on Friday night, they retired the jersey of Chipper Jones. Now, this can get confusing to people, so listen to the question now. Is Chipper the greatest Atlanta Brave of all time? The only reason I have to state it like that is we all know Hank Aaron might be one of the great players, if not the greatest of all time. A lot of his numbers put up in Milwaukee. So is it Chipper? Is it Henry Aaron? Is it somebody else?
If you say yes, you cannot be wrong. Chipper Jones, his entire 19-year career spent in an Atlanta Brave uniform. As you mentioned, Hammer and Hank came over from Milwaukee. But if you say Hank Aaron, you can't be wrong either. Both of those guys, great citizens, great stewards of the Braves jersey. Great to see Chipper Jones go up where he belongs in the rafters. And if he ever finds himself in a court of law on a speeding violation or something, and you find him guilty, you should be escorted from the courtroom, because this guy has been a solid Brave his entire career, and I was so happy to see him go up there in the rafters. Not many guys will get a chance to play 19 years for one team, and I don't know if we'll ever see that again for the Braves.
The amount of years, the amount of offense, and what I will talk about is his underrated defense. I know we spend so much time in the 400 home runs and the hits and the batting average, rightly so. He was an MVP winner. He played a good third base for a long time, and it was always something that we, sort of at the end of the career, became a punchline because Chipper couldn't move as well and do some of the things. How about in the middle of his career, he goes out to left field? There was a point where he played about 7 years of his career, and then they said, we want to bring in Vinny Castilla. Would you go out to left field? Okay, fine. The ultimate team move, Chipper goes out to left. Not a great left fielder, but he did it for the betterment of the team, which you have to love. One of the all-time greats, and to me, the greatest Atlanta Brave of all time.
When did he complain? Did he complain about going to left field?
No.
Did he complain about injury? Did he complain about anything? He did what was required of him. He did what leaders do. He did what was best for the team, and he did it for 19 years.
All right, to the NBA we go, where the Dwight Howard chase is on. The Lakers are begging with billboards. You got the Hawks, the Mavs, the Rockets, Golden State, all just rolling out the red carpet for Dwight, saying, come play your basketball here. Now, I'm going to ask you where you think he ends up, Brandon, but here's what I find intriguing. I've heard more folks tell me about what a bad guy Dwight is, and he's an immature guy, and he's petulant, and he's not going to be on the right side of what the team wants. Yet these teams are all begging for his services. Something's not adding up.
Well, he averages 18 points and 13 rebounds per game, so that's why they want his services. He's also a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, so it's not just offensive rebounding. He does help you block shots and protect the rim. I think what he's going through, he's suffering some of the ills that LeBron James suffered, which it seems like there's this grand focus on me and this grand tour of me. Obviously, if a guy's looking for a new job, he needs to go and check out the ownership, check out to see if it's a good thing for him for the next few years of his career. So I think that's what he's suffering. He's a guy that comes across as a little silly, and you don't know if you want your superstar to be silly. You want the appearance to be that the only thing that matters is winning championships and not doing puppet shows on the internet like Dwight Howard has done sometimes.
Here's what I'll say when I try to bring in LeBron and Dwight together, two guys that didn't go to college. This is the first time they've enjoyed the recruiting tour. This is the first time people have said, come play for us, you'll get this, this, and this. And I think they're enjoying that. Big deal. So what? You know what, Dwight, I think when it's all said and done, I have this Houston or Dallas feeling, maybe Houston. Hakeem was a part of their recruiting session with him. They can pay him a ton of money. They can build around with James Harden and company. So that's where I think it goes when it's all said and done. All right, one of the more intriguing NBA teams could happen for two different reasons. The Brooklyn Nets made a trade, and they bring in two vets who I don't know how much they have left, but this is the Nets going for it. They're saying to the Miami Heat, we just got Paul Pierce. We just got Kevin Garnett to add to Darren Williams, to add to Joe Johnson and Brook Lopez. I think it's dangerous. I think you're getting a group here that you got hammies, and you've got groins, and you've got elbows, and you've got guys who could miss a substantial amount of time, but at playoff time, will they be there and matter?
How many times have we seen in sports, Matt Chernoff, you just take some guys with accolades and former championships and dump them on a team, and it doesn't work out? I think we saw that obviously with Miami their first year. You cannot just put great players together and boom, it's magic. There's a thing called chemistry. There's a thing called knowing your teammates, and that is something that I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are going to have the time to go through. You might as well call them the Brooklyn Celtics, as that's who they're pretty much getting if Jason Terry, Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce end up there. And then who's getting the ball at the end of the game? Will it be Darren Williams? Will it be Paul Pierce? Will it be Joe Johnson? Will it be there you go with your main man, Joe Johnson.
What's he going to do?
Who's getting the ball? You're just adding a bunch of guys to a situation that already proved that it didn't work. You're going to have to invest in making good basketball decisions. I don't know if this is one if Brooklyn wants to win an NBA title.
Now, the LA Clippers invested a lot in Chris Paul to keep CP3 in Clipper Nation. Doc Rivers becomes the new head coach. It was pretty obvious. He wanted Doc. Doc wants Chris Paul. To me, he's the best of the free agent bunch. Now they've got Blake Griffin. They've got a core. Can they continue to build around that core? We'll find out about that. What we do know is you got the best floor general in the NBA.
Yeah, and that goes to the previous point. You're not just trying to add a bunch of pieces to the gumbo. You already have a nice nucleus. You have your point guard in Chris Paul. You have a big man and a guy who can rebound in Blake Griffin. You have a guy that can come off the bench like Jamal Crawford. So you're building something that can be sustaining. Now you bring in a coach who's won an NBA title. We'll see if they can overcome. Kobe Bryant doesn't have many years left in that body. It could be the fact that Chris Paul is the king of L.A. before it's all said and done.
Now, we have some trash talk in college football. And I remember a time when people, and I'm talking fans and teams, would really get hot and bothered over stuff like this. Sammy Watkins, the star wide receiver at Clemson, says not only will Clemson beat Georgia, he says we'll beat the mess out of Georgia the way we should. Now, he's speaking in terms of their schedule and says we're about us, not anybody else. I don't think, Brand, this is that big of a deal. You've got one of the more talented players in college football who, to me, will go out and back up his statement. I just don't even see Georgia probably getting that bothered over this, even if it's bulletin board material.
We say one thing, and then we say we want another. We say we want guys to express themselves. We say we want people to be honest, and then we get angry or sometimes when we say we want those things, and then they speak out. I don't have a problem with it. The guy thinks he's on a good football team. Guess what? He is. The guy thinks he's a good football player. Guess what? He is, and he thinks he can beat the Georgia Bulldog. I don't think he can be able to do that along with his team. But the bottom line is he's a guy who is confident. He's a guy who's having fun. He's a guy who thinks his team can win. I don't think there's a problem at all with that in college football.
No, we're confident. We're going to have some fun. And we're going to talk some baseball. Jim Powell, the radio voice of the Atlanta Braves, he will join us next here on The Late Shift.
Now back to the Dantanna's Late Shift. Brought to you by Attorney Ray Giudice, featuring the Knights of Cellini Kick Line and the Chernoff Dancers.
And welcome back to The Late Shift. We have passed the midpoint of the baseball season. The Braves are in first place, have a nice lead. But as they've said, boy, we can play a lot better, especially offensively. With that in mind, let's bring in the fine play-by-play voice on the radio of the Atlanta Braves, Jim Powell, who joins us here on The Late Shift. Jim, it's a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's my honor to be on.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. Let's start with a couple of things here offensively, Jim, and one being Freddie Freeman, who to me has been the most consistent part of this offense. It is uncanny how good he is in those clutch runner and scoring position opportunities, and it doesn't seem to slow down.
He's just an outstanding hitter, and I think maybe a lot of people didn't pay a whole lot of attention when Greg Walker said he's got one of the best swings he's ever seen in baseball, but he wasn't kidding apparently. And what I love about Freeman is it seems like he's got not one of the best swings, but he's got 4 or 5 of the best swings in baseball. He can attack those pitches away. He can handle pitches inside. He seems to invent a new swing path depending on the situation and the location of the pitch, and that makes him a consistent all-fields hitter.
Jim, good to see what we've gotten out of Jason Hayward. He seems to be a much better player when his appendix is inside of his body, doing a very good job of shaking off the injury, coming along the average, creeping up, doing a very good job of creating havoc when he's been on base. Just an all-around player, and hopefully his numbers will continue to rise.
Yeah, he's a mega talent. There's no doubt about it. And we saw enough of him having success last year where I really didn't worry, even though he got off to the slow start. During the slow start, I'm not making excuses for him, but he did hit a number of balls that were run down on warning tracks and line drives right at him. I felt like he was hitting better than his numbers indicated. But in the month of June, he settled in. I think he's made an adjustment at the plate, a little quieter with the head as he's waiting for the pitch to come in. And he's hitting the ball to all fields and grinding out some really good at-bats consistently right now.
Jim, I know it's cliched, but I am one who believes in what you've done in the back of the baseball card, and eventually at the end of the year, those numbers are going to be similar. Brian McCann fits that bill now that he's healthy again and he's swinging the bat. You know, he's had some peaks and valleys this year, but the home run numbers are there. I think you're going to see the batting average come back by the end of the year as well. I
would agree with you. I mean, Brian McCann, when healthy, can hit anybody. And the fact that he's now starting to drive the ball and he's backing up Freeman in the lineup, that's a win-win. It's a win for Freeman. It's a win for Freddie Gonzalez, too.
Pitching, one thing we can't overlook, Mike Minor has been absolutely awesome this year. He's taking advantage of the run support he's been given. What's been different about his game this year as opposed to last year?
Well, really, you know, if you want to look back over a full calendar year, about the All-Star break from last year to now, he's just been one of the top pitchers in baseball. And I've asked my partner, Don Sutton, on a number of occasions this season, when do we stop saying, boy, Mike Minor is really hot right now, and we start saying, Mike Minor is good. I mean, he's just good. And he's commanding his pitches on both sides of the plate, mixing them up nicely. He's a very talented pitcher, and I think he hides the ball well, so his 90-91 can sneak in on batters, and he can blow it right past them. And he's legit. He's not going anywhere.
Well, I think the fun part, if you're a Brave fan, is this staff, for the most part. You've got Mahalam, certainly a veteran, and Hudson. But you got young guys. Medlin's still in the very young part of his career. Minor, much younger, and Julio Teheran, Jim. There's so many accolades you could throw his way. He had 2 or 3 rough starts at the beginning of the season, but since then, I mean, lights out with everything he's done.
Right now, you could make the case that he's pitching better than anybody in that rotation, and you just ran down the names. That's a pretty impressive list of arms. But Teheran is really, I don't know if I've ever seen a pitcher improve as dramatically from one year to the next as Julio Teheran. I mean, last year he's getting ransacked at AAA as he repeats that level. And we saw him in spring training, and he looked like a guy that was, you know, throwing a pitch and turning around looking at the radar gun, throwing a pitch, turning around looking at the radar gun. Now, if he wanted to look at the radar gun, it would be a much different story because he's pitching at 5 different speeds. He's got 2 fastballs now, mid-90s 4-seamer and a good 90-91 2-seamer that's darting for him. He's got a nice changeup in the mid-80s. He's got a slider in the low 80s that he's commanding on both sides of the plate, and he's got a super slow curveball that he drops in the low to mid-70s. And he's mixing all of his pitches well, so you can't sit on anything, and he's just dominating right now.
And, Jim, you look at what you're getting on the back end. Good hitting, good starting pitching, and then you get to the end of the game. Craig Kimbrell, absolutely automatic when he comes in to shut down the game. It almost just seems like it permeates throughout the team and throughout the league. When this guy comes out of the bullpen and he is on the mound, it's not going to be long before the Braves are going to be winners at the end of the game.
You know, he had a little lull maybe early in the season. We all worried that maybe the World Baseball Classic could have some impact on him. I'm sure a lot of us would have preferred that they not ask him to pitch on the team, although it's obvious why they did. But he is certainly rounded into form now, and he is as dominant right now as he was last year, and that's a considerable statement.
Well, let me talk to you about the skipper here, Jim, Freddie Gonzalez. And unfortunately, I work in radio as well, where we're going to nitpick anything. And I hear from these folks nonstop who want to nitpick the manager. My defense has been, when you look at what he's had to go through, and I talked to him in spring training and said, this might be the easiest, quote, year you have of penciling in your starting 8. Well, it hasn't worked out that way due to injury and inconsistency. I think he's done another fine job of working through some of those issues.
I think he has too. I think Freddie Gonzalez is severely underrated in the Braves fan base. Not unusual. I mean, a lot of people thought Bobby Cox was a bad manager. I mean, people tend to, it's like the backup quarterback syndrome. Whoever the manager is, you're going to find some disagreement with him, and you're going to pick on him. And, I mean, in Philadelphia, they thought Charlie Manuel was an idiot until all of a sudden he's, got his team dominating the world. So Freddie has done a really nice job handling these guys who have struggled in the first couple of months of the season. You've got to find that balance between, hey, we need these guys to find it. They have to play in order to play their way out of it. But on the other hand, we've got to win games. We can't just sit around and give up in games with a lineup full of cold hitters. So I think he's done a really good job of utilizing his bench, giving guys a day, but never having those players feel like he's lost confidence in them. And you can see one by one those hitters that have been struggling perking up.
A great listen on the radio. I would tell all fans, not just Brave fans, Jim Powell and Don Sutton do a fine job. Jim, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I really appreciated talking some baseball with you guys.
Absolutely. There he is, Jim Powell, the play-by-play voice of the Atlanta Braves. And I love what he said there, Brandon, too, about Freddie. Patience. It's not an easy thing to have when you're seeing guys struggle, but you need that, and that's something that is going to pay off in the long run for guys like Mike Minor, Julio Teheran, Jason Hayward. You've seen that patience.
Hold on to this. It's a marathon, not a race.
I'm going to write that down. It's a marathon.
Not a sprint race.
No, not a sprint.
It's a marathon.
It is a marathon. All right, we go web hitting. We check out some of the big news around the intranet next here on The Late Shift. And welcome back to The Late Shift. A couple of ways to get in touch with us. On Twitter, you can find us at Dantanna's LS, or on Facebook, friend us. Keep up with the show, the Dantanna's Late Shift, right there for you on Facebook. All right, so we like to look around the world of the web and find some of those wackier pieces of video that maybe you missed or you saw once and you want to see again. Now I'm going to take you to the Tour de France, which means the Tour of France, the bike race that we've all known and loved for all these years. You think you have a number of obstacles, just like hills, mountains. How about a dog? You have to deal with this little pooch who's getting in the way, and I want you to watch this pileup that whoa!
Oh, my goodness.
Could have caused right there. Now, I love our animals, man's best friend, but you think what could have happened right there if those bike riders decide to put the brakes on. More than any of that, where did this video come from, by the way?
Looks like it's from out of town.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's more than out of town. Oh, I can't really read that writing. Anywho, everybody finished okay. The dog was fine. The folks on the bikes were fine. Everything that ends well, that's a piece of good news. So nobody was hurt in that. All right, so the NBA draft has come and gone. David Stern, his time as commissioner has come and gone. And for whatever reason, the folks, be it in this case in Brooklyn or for many years at Madison Square Garden, the New York fans love to give the commissioner some grief. Take a listen, his last hurrah at the NBA draft.
And thank you for that enthusiastic Brooklyn
Boo!
welcome. With the first pick in the 2013
Now watch the commissioner
NBA
play up to
draft,
this right here.
The Cleveland
like a wrestler.
Cavaliers select.
Look at the crowd.
A dramatic pause.
Boo!
Dramatic pause.
I can't hear you.
Boo!
He should have painted his. He should have dyed his hair blonde.
The only thing you didn't do is yell, what? What?
Should have gone with the Hollywood Hogan blonde goatee.
Can't get enough of that. All right, speaking of the wrestling world, it's an anniversary, the 15th anniversary of the Hell in the Cell match. You wrestling fans will know what I'm talking about. If you're not a wrestling fan, you have to enjoy the work that guys like Mick Foley and The Undertaker put in these matches where they fling themselves off cages, where they land on tacks, where they bloody themselves up. It is the dangerous and the most dangerous match in all of wrestling, Brandon.
Complete dedication to your craft. Jumping from 20 feet above the air, as you said, being body slammed onto tacks, steel chairs, and tombstone pile drivers.
No!
Rolling over on the tacks. My God, the humanity. These guys put in work and a match that will never be forgotten as Mick Foley and The Undertaker put on one for the ages.
All right, that is the 15th anniversary. And staying with the wrestling theme, we've got to pay tribute to one of the dumbest characters of all time. Nonetheless, this character had a family. Doink the Clown, remember him from wrestling lore? He lost his battle at the age of 57 as he passes away. And I don't know what else to say, but condolences out to the rest of the Doinks, Mrs. Doink, the kid Doinks, the cousin Doinks, and everybody else. clowns have families too, home team.
They do, and they're people. Clowns are people too.
Are they?
And you have to recognize that this guy was not only scary to legendary wrestlers such as the great Hulk Hogan and the great wrestlers that he saw in Macho Man Savage, but he also scared little kids at birthday parties for many years to come.
This is why kids do have fears of clowns.
You just don't need a clown in a wrestling suit.
We're the only clowns around here. We don't need help from doing. All right, we'll class this joint up. Ray Giudice, our legal eagle, will join us next to talk about all things in the sports world as we continue on The Late Shift.
Now back to the Dantanna's Late Shift. Brought to you by attorney Ray Giudice with the Cellini All Cello Orchestra and the Chernoff Improvisational Mimes.
And there he is, the man in living color, Ray Giudice, our legal insider. Mr. Giudice, we start with a story that has gripped not only the NFL world, but the sports nation, and that is the continuing saga of Aaron Hernandez. Now, the timeline of this, how long is this going to take? How long does it play off? Does either side have a philosophy on how long they want this to go before we get to trial?
Yeah, quite frankly, if I'm law enforcement, I might slow things down a little bit. I don't think they've gone too fast. They've gone very prudently. But I think the longer this takes, the more they're going to find. We're talking about old domestic violence charges, shooting some guy in the eye in Florida is a civil lawsuit. Perhaps 2 other homicides were at the base of this case. People are going to come forth. I'd slow it down. Now, until he's indicted, the defense can't file what's called a speedy trial demand, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. My guesstimate is he's on trial for these charges in the spring of next year.
Does he have to worry about his other 2 alleged accomplices rolling on him, being that they probably don't have as much money and probably a little bit better to deal with?
That's right, and that's what happens is the first guy to roll gets the deal, the second guy to roll kind of gets the deal, the last guy that didn't roll gets rolled on, and that's how that works. So you can rest assured those 2 co-defendants, their lawyers are telling them right now, look, if you're not the gunman, if you didn't pull the trigger, if you don't have a bad prior history, tell me what you know. Let me see if I can cut you that deal now. Cooperate early and often. It's like charitable giving. Do it.
Joe LaFlege, safety for the Colts, pulled over for allegedly speeding, drinking, and driving. He had an open container. He had a gun. He had unregistered ammunition.
Is that all?
He should have had his driver's license out and his other hand on his phone to call you. What do you do when the police pull you over with all of that?
Well, if you've got a weapon in the car, the first thing you should do is tell the officer you have a weapon in the car. Put your hands on the car door up. Something, just say, I've got a weapon in the car, it's legally owned, it's under the seat. Don't let them find it on their own because they get real upset then. But here's what these NFL and NBA players need to know. Cities like New York City, cities like D.C., where our president lived, they have really tough gun laws. They don't want you running around drinking, driving, and shooting because, as we say on the show, what? Don't do that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this NFL gun culture is really something the NFL's got to deal with. These young guys, I don't understand it myself, but as we were talking earlier, people do test them. They feel they need to protect themselves. I would say get yourself a bodyguard.
Yeah.
Cheaper, less dangerous.
A guy like Brandon will always be there to protect you.
Muscle up.
Let me talk to you about this Winnipeg Jet defenseman who was just taking out money at his ATM, gets robbed, gets beaten. And obviously, you don't want that to happen. But the good news is you have cameras everywhere around these banks and around these ATMs. So you would think we'd get a conclusion here where somebody.
Well, you hope so. The ATM that he was at has a camera. Think about it. Almost every bank. There's a bank usually on the other side of the street on the corner. Or the CVS has a camera. You are being videoed in major metropolitan areas from the minute you get out of your car at your parking deck to the time you get in your office and go shopping. They're probably going to come to the conclusion of this. Plus, not only that. These guys can't help themselves. They take the ATM card, they leave their fingerprints on, the bad guys. They try to use it again. They're going to get caught. They're going to get prosecuted.
Well, if you want this man's advice, he's always there for you and pretty easy to find on Facebook. You see Ray Giudice there, also on Twitter and LinkedIn. And Ray brought something up to me before that is common sense for most of it. It's July 4th.
That's right.
The roadblocks are out. Just be extra careful.
That's right.
Get a taxi, get a driver. Don't take any chances.
Enhanced safety checks everywhere in Metro Atlanta. If you're coming out from dinner, use Safe Ride, get a cab, Uber.
Be smart.
Be smart.
And get the app.
Get my app.
The Ray Giudice app. He'll always be looking out for you. Our folks around the Southeast as well. It's pretty easy to get in touch with Ray in that case. Thanks to Jim Powell, Braves play-by-play voice, for joining us a little bit earlier. Brandon, good work. Ray, thank you as always. I'm Matt. Enjoy your July 4th week. We will talk to you next week. here on The Late Shift.